siblings, between parents and children, between husbands and wives. I think that it's something that a lot of people can relate to. If you have any one of those things.
Well, you can. I do think you have an interesting way of plotting your books in that you set up a scenario that looks almost like a cliche. You've got an older brother, married forever, gets frisky, tries internet hooking up. Hooking up, I'm never totally clear whether that means, but whatever it is. Anyway,
it's one of those elastic terms.
Yeah, very elastic terms. So, so he gets himself involved and in bed with some woman, and then bad things happen, and it looks like, oh, yawn, and then he comes to his younger brother resentfully to sort of bail him out before his life blows up in his face, and merchant bankers presumably have to have a sort of pristine...
Yes, it would not be a career-enhancing thing.
No, not to mention his marriage could detonate, and that's a very expensive thing in a community property state.
Very.
I assume, is New York a community property state? Arizona is.
New York is not a community property state, I don't believe, but someone like David's wife would hire a very aggressive lawyer.
Right. I think there's still penalties in New York for adultery and marriage and stuff.
It's not a no-fault state.
Okay. That was sort of the question. No-fault states and community property can actually be just as expensive as fault states, whatever. But so he's looking at really bad things, and he comes to John March, and he's resentful about it. Now, this is the stuff we've all read many, many times.
Yep.
And what I think is so interesting about you is that you sort of blindside everybody with this, or you not blindside, you blindfold them with it. And then the next thing you know, the book has gone off someplace that was completely unexpected. You've done that in the other two books. I think Death's Little Helpers, your second book, was another one. Now, this is where you bring sex in. I mean, there's a lot of sex fueling your plots, too.
There's a certain amount of sex, and probably Red Cat.
What do you mean a certain amount? Look at the cover.
This is a truth in advertising thing, though. I have to say the cover is very fitting, and it goes with the plot of the book. Yes, there is a lot of sex in Red Cat.
And sex for money, I might add.
There's sex for money and sex for art.
Right.
And of course, there's March's own problems with relationships, and and a lot of parallels between what March himself is going through with his married girlfriend, and what he sees his brother going through, and his brother's wife, and even ultimately the missing woman Wren. So that there are lots and lots of parallels that I created, and that was fun. Yeah, I think you're quite right. I mean, the kind of the initial setup, was just that, and what was interesting to me was really getting into who this woman was, who was Wren, and why was she doing what she was doing, and the mystery of really who is David, and why is he doing what he's doing, because Wren was just one of a series of women who he's hooked up with, and March of course had no idea. He turns out he knows very little about his siblings, and it was interesting to sort of ponder and examine questions of how well do we really know other people anyway.
Well, but David is more of a stock character in the sense that he's certainly not the only middle-aged Upper East Side,
No, but he's really tortured. There's the public face that David presents, which is very, proper, superior, certainly judgmental when it comes to his younger brother, and antagonistic, and maybe even prim. And then there's the reality of David, and and there are a couple of scenes where we see David kind of drunk, and we realize that he is quite a tortured soul under that.
His wife is an interesting character too. I thought you exposed her under the microscope too. It's all rather surprising. But I guess another question then would be: do you know where this? Do you have this twist in mind from the beginning?
I had in mind from the beginning that I wanted to examine these characters, and that to me less interesting in a way than who did what to whom, than who killed who and why, is really the question of relationships and kind of the family drama and the family mystery. That has always been, to me, kind of the most interesting thing. Those kinds of mysteries and kind of the emotional weather that you create. When I look back to the books that I love best, that's what I remember. I don't remember who did what to whom. I remember kind of the emotional weather of the thing. I read every Ross Macdonald, a zillion times.
I knew you'd read Ross Macdonald because his footprints are very heavy in your work.
Yeah, and I take that as a huge compliment because I'm wild about his work. And while I couldn't tell you exactly the plot of the Wycherley Woman versus
Yes, you can. All Ross Macdonald books were basically the same story, which was a man in search of father, an abandoned child, so to speak. So he's always kind of got somebody in search of a father and family.
He's got that family mystery at the core, and he's got those incredible, those hermetic households that he examines, and that beautiful blasted California landscape that provides the sort of emotional underpinning of everything. And those are the types of books that I love best. And necessarily as a writer, I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to do.
Well, even if you go back to Hammett, I don't know if you have read, we hosted a conference here in 1996, which was crime writers of that moment, successful ones, talking about classic crime writers. And among all the others that were here, Michael Connelly did a whole thing on Raymond Chandler. And Joe Gores, who is the biographer of Dashiell Hammett, did a long presentation on Hammett.
That was been great.
It's a terrific book. We were nominated for an Edgar for the published papers of the conference. Val McDermott actually had a paper in which she synthesized a Brit's view of because after all, Chandler, the British have sort of a stake in him since he was educated there. But one of the big differences that they all discussed is that Chandler's books are very character-driven, and the plotting is actually sloppy in some of them. The whole bit about,
what's going on?
What was with the chauffeur, and the big sleep, and even Chandler didn't have any idea, But that Hammett, particularly in, not in the Maltese Falcon, but the other, the character he wrote all the shorts,
The Continental Op.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The Continental Op guy, because he'd been a private investigator, which Joe Gores also was in his day, a repo guy and whatever, that his books were very much about plot. They were very process-driven, and the op was really kind of a vehicle, a means to an end rather than a character in himself. There was more characterization in the Maltese Falcon. And I've always thought Ross Macdonald was more in that tradition. He liked Lou Archer to be, what's it he said about Archer? That, if he turned sideways, he wouldn't cast a shadow?
That's right.